Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my quarterly favorites and stats. So I started doing this a few months ago. Basically, I made a video where I talked about my top 5 favorite books that I read in the months of April to June. And I also talked about my favorite TV shows and movies, and also my favorite videos that I made during that time. So I'm doing that exact same thing for the months of July through September. So what I'm going to do is save my top 5 books for the end of the video. And first, I thought it would be fun to talk about some reading stats. So I have my very shiny and fun holographic reading journal that my sister gave to me this past Christmas. So Amy, thank you so much. I use this all the time. So first, I thought I would give some general stats and then get into the genres of books that I've been reading these past 3 months. So between July and September, I read a total of 63 books. I DNF'd 2 books, so those 2 books are not included in the 63 books. I don't have any 1-star reads because that's very, very unusual for me to give a book 1 star. If I'm hating a book that much, I will simply DNF it. I do have 2 2-stars, 8 3-star reads, 32 4-star reads, and 20 5-star reads. And then the shortest book that I read at 152 pages was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. That is a nonfiction book. That is essentially a letter that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote to his 15-year-old son. And then the longest book that I read was Crescent City, which was 803 pages, which is an adult high fantasy novel. So then getting into genres, I read 45 adult books and 18 young adult books, which that's very interesting. I have noticed that overall this year I have been reading way more adult than young adult. I do think that most of that is adult romance, whether that be historical or contemporary romance. So then I read 5 fantasy books, which that actually surprised me. I just assumed that I read way more than that. I read 10 contemporary adult romance novels. I read 8 nonfiction books, which is also amazing because I do not typically read nonfiction at all, really. I mean, it wasn't until I want to say June or July that I really started getting into nonfiction. I read 4 contemporary, and by contemporary I mean literary fiction novels. I read 5 paranormal novels, 1 science fiction. I definitely need to fix that. I really want to get more into science fiction. 16 historical romances, no surprise at all. I read 14 arcs, and the kind of arcs that I get are ebook versions off of NetGalley. And then I read 4 mystery/thriller novels, which that is definitely going to change in the coming months, because in October I've been reading all of the horror/thriller novels, so that number will definitely be going up. Definitely let me know in the comments below if there are any stats that you would love to see me include in these videos. I got this idea from Kayla from Books and Lala. I will link her channel up in the cards above. She does these quarterly updates, and my videos do deviate from hers because she doesn't talk about her favorite TV shows or movies or anything like that. I just think it's really interesting to keep track of how many books of a certain genre that I'm reading. That's a huge telltale sign for me that my reading tastes are changing slightly throughout the years. Next, I want to talk about my top 3 TV shows and movies that I've watched in the last quarter. So the reason why I'm including these in my quarterly updates as opposed to my monthly wrap-ups or anything like that is because, as you can probably tell, I spend most of my time reading. That's how I'm able to read 20+ books per month. The only time that I ever really watch TV shows or movies is late at night when I'm uploading a video or getting ready to go to bed. I really don't spend a lot of time watching TV. So I thought that these videos would be the perfect opportunity for me to talk about my favorites. So the first TV show I want to mention is Encore. So this is a show that is on Disney+. Actually, all 3 of my favorites are on Disney+, so if you have that service, you will be able to access all of these. But this is a reality show. It's kind of difficult to explain, but if you are a huge fan of musical theater, this is the perfect reality show for you. So the very basic premise of this is that each episode reunites the cast from a high school musical so that they can sort of recreate the performance that they did years before. So for instance, the first episode was a production of Annie, and it was a reunion of the 1996 cast of Annie at this high school. I want to say it was in California. And so they reunited the cast, and all of these people are well into their 30s or 40s at this point, and they put on another performance of Annie. And what's really cool this time around is that they bring in like a professional Broadway director and choreographer and music director to put on pretty much a Broadway level performance. And the reason why I love this show so much is that, in case you guys don't know, I am a huge musical theater nerd. Musical theater was my first love for sure. I started out when I was 11 doing like community theater musicals. I ended up going to a performing arts high school and majoring in musical theater. Then when I went to college, I studied opera, so I definitely kind of deviated from musical theater, but I still very much love it. And I just love the idea of getting the opportunity to reprise a role that I did in high school. I can't talk about a Disney Plus show without mentioning Hamilton. This was the reason that I ended up getting Disney Plus. I actually got the package deal that you can get where it's like Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN Plus. So I have had the privilege of seeing Hamilton live twice, once in Houston and once in New Orleans. Of course, those are both touring companies. And it was so cool getting to see everything up close. It's an incredible production. Of course, it's amazing getting to see the original cast. I'm sure a lot of you have already watched this if you have Disney Plus, so I'm not going to talk about it for too long, but yeah, it's definitely something that is worth the subscription and worth watching. And then my third favorite is actually 3 movies. They're part of a series, and this is the Descendants movies. So all 3 of these are Disney Channel original movies, and because I got Disney Plus, I had the opportunity to finally watch them, and I have to say, these are probably the best Disney Channel movies from at least the last 10 years. I think the production is incredible. I love the overall premise. If you don't know what these movies are about, essentially centers on the descendants or the children of Disney movie villains. Our main character Mal is Maleficent's daughter. We also have Jafar's son. We also have the evil queen from Snow White, her daughter, and Cruella de Vil's son. And so they are the 4 major characters of this movie. And so another part of this premise is that all of the villains were banished to this island, and you can tell that like poverty is definitely a huge issue there. And so then the 4 main characters get this amazing chance to go study at what is essentially an elite boarding school in Oregon, which is the land where the good guys live. So yeah, I really enjoyed all 3 movies. If you guys don't know, these are musicals, and I think the songs are really catchy. Kenny Ortega directed and choreographed, I think, and I love his movies. He directed all of the High School Musical movies, Hocus Pocus, of course, so he always does an amazing job. And I think the third movie is my personal favorite, and I think the second one is my least favorite, but they're all a fun time. Also, Kristen Chenoweth plays Maleficent, so Mal's mom. So there's definitely some famous people in these movies, and I highly recommend watching them, even if you think you're not gonna like them. I really think that you will. And then I quickly wanted to mention some of my own videos that I released between July and September that I'm particularly really proud of. The first one is my Sarah J. Maas tier ranking video. I've talked about this before, but those videos by far take the most work doing a tier ranking video because I'm filming on my camera, but I also have to screen record on my laptop, and you know, splicing the 2 things together definitely takes a lot of work. And I just love how that video turned out because I just adore Sarah J. Maas so much, and I loved talking about my favorites versus the books that I don't love so much and things like that. So I'm also really proud of my most anticipated fall 2020 releases video. I actually really adore the way the thumbnail came out for that video because that's the first time I've ever done a collage of book covers as the background. I just love the colors and the brightness and all of that. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about my top 5 favorite books that I read between the months of July and September. These are not going to be in any particular order. I'm just going to pick them up as I have them in this stack before me. So the first book I want to talk about is the only romance in this stack, and that is Destiny's Embrace by Beverly Jenkins. This is my first novel from her. Definitely did not disappoint. I just could not give this less than 5 stars. So she tends to write historical romances that take place in the Wild West era. So this whole series, I believe, takes place in California. We are centering on our main characters, Mariah and Logan. And so essentially, Mariah is living in Philadelphia. She has a very abusive mother that she works for. She's a seamstress. So basically, one of Mariah's friends gets her a job out in California as a housekeeper for a rancher whose name is Logan. And so she ends up leaving her life in Philadelphia, getting on a train and going all the way across the country to California. And what I love about this book is that there is an enemies to lovers aspect to it, because Logan really forces Mariah to find her voice and find that fire within her, because she just can't help but argue with him about every little thing having to do with his house, the way it's run, things like that. And over time, they start to fall in love with each other, and just the chemistry between these two characters is everything. I definitely got butterflies while I was reading this. Oh man, I could just rave and rave about this romance, but this is the first book in the Destiny trilogy. I think that's what it's called. So I definitely plan on reading the other 2 books in that series. I actually have them right here. It's Destiny's Surrender and Destiny's Captive, because this series essentially follows these 3 brothers. Logan is the oldest brother. So yeah, it's just, it's such a great historical romance. Now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like my top 5 are going to be no surprise to any of you guys if you've been following me for a while, because all 5 of these books I've definitely raved about quite a bit recently, at least. So the next one is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I read this back in July. So this is a literary / historical fiction novel, and we center around these 2 twins, Stella and Desiree, and they're from this town in Louisiana where everyone is black, but they are very, very, very light-skinned, and so I think most of them are what you would consider to be white passing. They end up just leaving their small town and moving to New Orleans, I think at the age of 16. And then Stella ends up just up and leaving New Orleans without telling Desiree anything. And we find out that she decides to live her life as a white woman since she is white passing. And I also want to mention that this takes place in the 1960s. So she ends up marrying a white man and moving away. And then Desiree ends up marrying a black man. And so this book essentially ends up following Stella and Desiree's separate lives. It also follows the story of Desiree's daughter Jude and Stella's daughter Kennedy. I just adore Britt Bennett's writing style. I loved how she wrote all 4 of these women and how their lives intersect, and also how their lives are very separate from one another. The most interesting character for me, I think, was Stella, because of how she started to live as a white woman and how she was constantly afraid that she was somehow going to be found out by either her husband or some random person that she meets on the street. And we also see how she starts to have internalized racism throughout the years. So for me, her character is the most compelling, but there are just amazing things going on with all 4 of these characters and their stories. I cannot recommend it enough. Next up, we have the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This is the one horror novel that I read over the last 3 months. So this is about Patricia, and she is a typical Southern housewife in the 1980s. This book chronicles quite a few years. I think it starts in the late 80s and goes into the late 90s. And she is a part of this book club, and they start reading true crime novels, which was a really fun aspect. I loved all of the different side characters that we had going on. But there is this man, James, I believe is his name. Yes, James Harris. And he moves to the neighborhood to take care of an elderly aunt, I think. But Patricia notices some very weird and questionable things going on with James. And I'm gonna end the synopsis there, but I'm sure, as you can tell from the synopsis, there is a vampire involved. First of all, this is definitely a horror novel. I've been seeing a lot of videos on BookTube recently where people describe this as a fun time, and I don't know what they're talking about, because it's genuinely a scary book. Yes, there's kind of like satire elements thrown in here because the whole idea behind this book was that Grady Hendrix wanted to pit his mother, who was a very typical Southern housewife, against Dracula, against a vampire. So there are fun elements, I guess, but at the end of the day, this is a scary book. It is a horror novel. There is body horror involved in this, so if that makes you really queasy, then maybe avoid this book. But I felt like Grady Hendrix wrote it in a way that it wasn't too gory, it wasn't too gross, because I was able to stomach it, but just be aware of that before going into this. Next up, we have a book that quite literally took over my life while I was reading it, and that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. So this is a pretty dark literary contemporary fiction novel, and this is about our main character, Vanessa. We have two main timelines going on. We have her at the age of 15 when she's going to this elite boarding school, and then we have her in present day. I believe at this point she's in like her mid to late 20s. So when she's 15, she ends up getting entangled in this really messed up romantic relationship with her English teacher, Jacob Strain. At the time when this relationship is happening, Vanessa does view it as a healthy relationship, although there are some times throughout this book that you can tell that Vanessa is kind of seeing the light and seeing the abusive nature of the relationship, but at the same time, neither her nor Jacob ever end it. And so then in 2017, which is present day, we see that she is still in contact with him. Now we are seeing that there are students who currently go to this boarding school that are accusing Jacob Strain of abusing them. So yes, obviously there are huge content warnings for sexual assault and pedophilia. I think also suicidal thought. This is a very heavy book, but at the same time, there is a very bright light at the end of the tunnel that is this book. I loved seeing Vanessa start to heal towards the very end. I also just loved how realistic and flawed and imperfect of a character Vanessa is. She's not your perfect victim, quote unquote, that a lot of people would want her to be, I feel like. And last but certainly not least is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is the first book in her adult fantasy series called Crescent City, in case you don't know. This is one of those books that the more time I've spent away from it, the more I have fallen in love with it. Immediately after finishing this book, I did love it. I mean, I gave it 5 stars. There's no doubt about that. But through watching other booktubers' reviews of this book and reading vlogs and things like that, there are more aspects about this book that I have appreciated over the last few months. So first of all, our main character is Bryce Quinlan. She is half fae, half human. This is a very modern high fantasy world. This takes place on a planet called Midgard, and specifically in a city called Lunathian, but it's also known as Crescent City. So one of the first things that made me fall in love with this world is the diversity of the creatures that we have, because not only do we have fae, we have humans, there's angels, there's the Asteri, which are the superior beings that rule over this whole planet. Geez, what else? There's werewolves, vampires, mermaids, witches. I mean, the list goes on, and they're divided into different houses. So other than the House of Earth and Blood, we have the House of Sky and Breath, we have the House of Many Waters, and we have the House of Flame and Shadow. So yeah, there's just so many amazing things going on in this world. I really feel like Sarah J. Maas completely stepped it up in terms of that. One of the things that I have come to appreciate after reading this is the amazing friendship between Bryce and Danica. Danica is a werewolf shifter. I just love their friendship so much. What I also adore about this book is the mental health representation, because essentially very early on in the book, something very traumatic and tragic happens to Bryce. And so we see her become very depressed. I will say there is a content warning for suicidal thoughts at one point. We see her go through this incredible journey of healing, and part of that also has to deal with her romantic relationship with Hunt, who is a fallen angel. But a lot of the work she kind of does herself, and it's something that's just beautiful to see throughout this book. I could just go on and on about this book, but without a doubt, this is going to be one of my top favorite books of 2020. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this quarterly favorites slash reading stats video. Like I said, definitely leave a comment down below if you want me to tweak the format of this video in any way. Also, I wanted to point out that I am getting very close to reaching 500 subscribers, and when I reach that milestone, I am definitely planning on doing a giveaway. And as always, I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss anything that I brought up in this video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!